The Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration will come to order. A quorum is present. Vice Chair Engen, have you had a chance to review the minutes?
I have, and I move their adoption.
Vice Chair Engen moves the minutes for March 10th, 2025. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Next order of business is the supplemental calendar for the day. We're proposing calendaring 5 bills for the supplemental calendar for Thursday, March 13th, 2025. House File 550, Torkelson. House File 1218, Heinzman. House File 1247, Nadeau. House File 2131, Rarick. And House File 2133, Davids. I move the adoption of the supplemental calendar for the day pursuant to Rule 1.21. The Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration will designate Thursday, March 13th, 2025 for the adoption of the supplemental calendar for the day. Any discussion? Representative Hollins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Representative Heinzman here to answer questions?
I do not see Representative Heinzman here yet, but I believe he's coming.
Do you want me to just proceed?
Yeah, go ahead and proceed with your question unless you want me to come back to you.
You can come back to me.
Okay, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are also for Chair Heinzman.
Okay. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unrelated to this motion, there is actually an error with the minutes. So I would encourage Representative Engen to withdraw that motion. My name is actually misspelled, so.
We'll have staff correct that. Thank you. Sorry about that. Leader Long.
Mr. Chair, as long as we're buying time. So this is an additional 5 bills to be added to the calendar for the day for Thursday. So by my count, that's 22 bills for the calendar. Is that correct?
That would be, I believe 17 plus 5 is 22.
I'm glad I got my math right. So I couldn't remember a time when there had been that many bills calendared for a single day. And so we looked it up, and it does turn out that that has happened in the past, but it was hasn't happened for 15 years. So we have broken at least the last decade and a half's record of number of bills calendared for one day, which is impressive. And so I guess I'll repeat the question I had in our previous rules hearing, which is it does not seem possible to get through 22 bills with a full debate in one floor session. So you had mentioned in our previous hearing that some of them would be not up for debate, and some of them would, and it would be helpful, I think, for our side to know which ones will be receiving a full debate and which ones will not.
Thank you, Leader Long. I believe that it is fewer pages of legislation than were passed last year with no review or debate at the end of session. In terms of your question, I think we'll communicate when we have ability to give you a little bit more of a preview on what might happen tomorrow. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every single bill that was in the end of session was subject to review and debate. So, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It would be helpful for us to know which of the 22 bills are for real and which are not. Thank you.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you. I don't see Representative Heinzman here, but I will go ahead and make my comments if that's okay.
Absolutely.
This is regarding House File 1218. As a former member of the LCCMR Commission, I have to speak against this. The LCCMR's original bill was incredibly bipartisan. It took a lot of work. We met for hours and hours and hours to determine which projects were worthy of being funded. And my understanding is now that this has been amended to include projects that didn't go through that process, that are primarily partisan in nature. And I think it's really interesting that we talk a lot about waste, fraud, and abuse, and then amending on projects that didn't go through a proper process that involves both legislators and community members and experts in their field, and instead are just being amended on at the last second in a Ways and Means Committee to make this bipartisan bill really not really partisan. The other thing I want to highlight is the fact that to fund those additional projects, the funds for the community grants program was rated. And as the former author, the chief author of the community grants program, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. But what I want to recognize is the fact that it wasn't my idea to create a small grants, community grants program. It was actually something that was brought to me by the community, by organizations that primarily do get funded by the LCCMR, but they recognized that a lot of organizations were having great ideas, had good work, and were not able to get through the funding process at the LCCMR. And so they wanted to help lift up and coach those smaller organizations to be able to achieve funding. And so I actually did an analysis of the projects that were submitted to LCCMR but were not funded. And those projects broke down to 40% of them, the majority of them, were from Republican districts. So not only is that amendment that went onto this bill stealing from that fund, it is potentially stealing from all of your districts, because those good projects that people wanted to do, instead they were cherry-picked, hand-picked to be projects that Representative Heinzman decided were worthy of being funded, instead of going through a proper process and being funded that would benefit all of your districts. So I just want to, sorry, I'm getting whispers. So I just want to recognize that there is a process in place. This is the people's money. This money comes from lottery sales, lottery ticket sales, and it goes into a fund that passed with overwhelming support. 70% of people were in favor of it. And by the way, people talked about the community grants project when they were campaigning on this, and the last time when it was on the ballot, and it still passed with over 70% support. So the fact that that fund has now been rated and is now going towards pet projects that were not through a vetted process is really disturbing to me. So when we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, I want us to focus on the fact that there's a proper process to go through, and those additional projects did not go through that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. Representative Purcell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Heinzman. We are discussing your bill to go to the floor, House File 1218. I echo everything that Representative Hollins said about the process. As the upcoming co-vice chair of the Environment Committee, would love to have this in front of the committee, this massive, massive shift. And when we did hear this in front of the Environment Committee, I know Representative Hansen asked Chair Heinzman if changes were coming to the bill, and maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe the answer was not in that committee, because we saw this happen in Ways and Means last night. But really the proper place to do that is in the Environment Committee. I wasn't consulted. I know the DFL lead, the co-chair Fisher, was not consulted. And I just want to say to all of the Minnesotans who serve on these committees that we have in our state, including LCCMR, this doesn't invalidate all of the time and energy and research that you put into it. And so from a process point of view, it's not a great look. And just from the outcome point of view, as a former applicant to LCCMR for my small nonprofit, there's absolutely no way that we could have competed with the University of Minnesota's and the huge, huge organizations that have professional grant writers and can write a very pretty proposal and get these state funds. And a small nonprofit like mine, in a rural place, in an agricultural place, absolutely would have and hopefully still will benefit from these small community grants. And so this is a program that I am willing to fight for, and to see that ripped out of all of the work that these citizens did on the LCCMR committee is very disappointing. And I absolutely will not support it in this form, even though I was very happy to support it as it left committee. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Purcell. There wasn't really a question there, but if you wanted to respond to any of that, Representative Heinzman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't hear a question either, but I do want to respond to both Representative Hollins and Representative Purcell. There does seem to be quite a misunderstanding as to what the bill actually does. Number one, the recommendations as they left the LCCMR are entirely intact. In those recommendations, no project was removed from those recommendations, and they continue to exist in my bill as they were and as they left the LCCMR. So I hope that that clears up a pretty significant argument that has been made over the last 24 hours. Yes, in addition to those recommendations, the amendment that was added in Ways and Means, which I would have, well, I'll put it another way. I'm happy to talk about that. The amendment, it addresses a program that was created in the last biennium that was handed off to the DNR to create a community grants program. And so when I hear some of the comments today about no guardrails, no process, that's what I'm trying to address in the amendment, is we have $58 million over this next biennium that the DNR was supposed to figure out how to disperse without a process like what is present in the LCCMR, but is not present inside DNR. 1.5% of the trust, $28 million per year, suddenly without all those things that I hear being, I think, praised as a good process. That doesn't exist under the language that was passed in the last biennium and that was handed over to the DNR. Creating the buckets of dollars, distributing those dollars in the program areas that are in the amendment, I think creates what we're all hoping for, is a better, more transparent process.
Thank you, Representative Heinzman. Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note for the record that 15 years ago, the last time that 22 bills were calendared for the day, that was while Democrats were in control of the Minnesota House.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. Representative Cagle?
You got me while I was doing my shake,
Sorry about
Mr.
that.
Chair. So I just kind of want to, last night I was in Ways and Means. I heard this bill for the first time. And you just said that the recommendations from the LCCMR stayed intact, correct?
Thank you, Representative Cagle. Representative Heinzman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendations that were passed out of the LCCMR are the underlying bill, and nothing was removed from those recommendations. That's what I said.
Representative Cagle?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, but that's not true because you changed the amount of funding going to the community grants. And so you changed it from that 1.5% to 0.5 of that 1.5%. So I do believe that that is changing the recommendations of the LCCMR. And then I also, something that was brought up in Ways and Means, I was just kind of curious, the last two meetings of the LCCMR, when they made those final recommendations, you weren't participating. Is there a reason that, if it's a personal reason, that's fine, but, this is a process that's really apparently labor intensive, and it sounds like, some of the recommendations that were made are on those last couple meetings, and so I was just kind of curious why you chose not to go to those meetings.
Thank you, Representative Cagle. Anything you want to say about that, Representative Heinzman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would. There does continue to be quite a misunderstanding, and I'm just going to assume that it's a misunderstanding. The recommendations in the underlying bill are exactly as they came out of the LCCMR. And there have been many cases where not just a Republican, but a Democrat may, for one reason or another, not be able to make a meeting, and the process continues forward, even if that personal issue, whatever it may be, prohibits that member from attending. And I believe that Representative Hansen, in fact, tried to address that in a change, a statutory change to the number of members that it requires to pass the LCCMR out of the committee, so that there has a better opportunity of receiving the required votes to be successful. And that, I think, was a way to address that issue, and hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Representative Heinzman. Representative Hollins, briefly.
Yep, I'll be quick. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. Representative Heinzman, you know that I don't have a misunderstanding on this. I understand what happened, and you're right. The LCCMR recommendations, as they came forward, were presented, and they are still included in there. But what happened was, with the amendment, it rated the money that had been set aside for the community grants program, and I understand the point that you're trying to make about where's the oversight with the community grants program. I think that's the point you're trying to make, right? And my understanding, because the way we wrote it, was that there was an advisory council that was to advise DNR on how that money was to be spent. And my understanding is that your amendment deleted that advisory council. Is that correct?
Thank you, Representative Hollins. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my amendment creates basically 4 buckets of dollars: 40%, 40%, 15%, and 5%. There continues to be a 5% available in the community grants program as it came out of legislation in the last biennium. The other buckets now are under, I guess you could argue, every one of us is going to have to decide whether that grouping of dollars, as I've arranged it in the amendment, every one of us will have that opportunity to vote on that as it comes to the floor.
Thank you, Chair Heinzman. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Heinzman. I serve on the Environment Committee, as you know, and we didn't talk about the community grants program when we talked about the LCCMR bill. And I think we did have a discussion about how nice it was to have a clean bill where we could all vote on this bill. So since apparently I don't serve on the Ways and Means Committee though, so it sounds like we added a very substantial change to this bill. Is it going to come back to the Environment Committee for us to look at it now that it's no longer that clean bill that we voted out of the Environment Committee?
Thank you, Representative Jordan. I think I can answer that. We're putting it on the calendar for the day in this motion.
So, Mr. Chair, does that mean it's not going to come back to the Environment Committee for us to look at?
Well, that would be, if there was a floor decision to send it back to the Environment Committee, that would be the way it happens. But the motion before us is to put it on the supplemental calendar for the day.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that is a good motion. This needs to be evaluated by the Environment Committee.
Leader Long.
Just ask for a roll call on the calendar for the day.
Roll call has been requested. I renew my motion to adopt this supplemental calendar for the day. And the clerk will take the roll. Chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Engen. Lead Long.
No.
Representative Coulter.
No.
Representative Frederick. No. Representative Hollins.
No.
Representative Jacob.
Yes.
Representative Cagle. No. Representative Nash. Aye. Representative Purcell.
Purcell, no.
Representative Schultz.
Schultz, aye.
Representative Scott. Representative Steer.
Aye.
Representative Zalezakar.
Aye.
There being 8 ayes and 6 nays, the motion prevails and the calendar is adopted. That concludes our agenda for today. The meeting is adjourned.